Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started here. Again, thank you everyone for joining, taking time out of your Tuesday. Yeah, it's some crazy times here in the world, and sometimes all we can do is stay focused and think about ways to drive business forward, which is what brings us here today. A couple guidelines for the webinar. I have muted everybody automatically. So that is hopefully beneficial to the group at large, so we don't hear any distractions in the background. As mentioned, my name is Mike. I'll be moderating, and I'm going to hand it off to Suzanne here, who will run the event. But I am available by chat if anyone has any queries they would like. You can message me anytime. And then if you have any questions for Suzanne throughout the webinar, you can post them. There's a Q&A function in Zoom. Message me if anyone doesn't see that, but it should be fairly clear to go ahead and post those, and we'll answer as we go. And then there will also be more of a designated time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I'll hand it over to Suzanne. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm Suzanne Somerville. I'm CEO here at Chronicled. We are really excited today to give an update in today's webinar about MediLedger and what's coming next. What we're going to cover today is, first, for those perhaps a little less familiar, what is MediLedger, and want to give a brief overview of the vision of the work that we're doing and what we hope to enable. We then want to address specifically the outcome of our FDA pilot work and the next steps associated with that work. And then finally, we're going to cover what's happening next, so people can be informed of activities that are both taking place today and what we think will be coming in the near future. As Mike mentioned, we'd be happy to take questions. Please pose them to Mike throughout the presentation. We'll try and address ones that are specific to what I'm discussing, and if not, we'll hold those questions to the end, and we'll be happy to come back and address any topics that I've gone through during the webinar. So first, what is MediLedger? MediLedger was founded back in 2017, specifically initially to address if blockchain could serve a purpose in addressing the Drug Supply Chain Security Act 2023 requirement that all drugs in the United States supply chain, that there would be an electronic interoperable system to manage the track and trace of prescription medicine in the event of suspect product. We're really appreciative of the companies that joined us then to try and understand better what blockchain and blockchain-based solutions would be capable of. And that work has led to the exciting work that has taken place across the last 3.5 years. From that, we've been able to look at and evaluate a variety of industry pain points and problems. And we have architected a solution that really, we believe, has the potential to really transform a lot of the ways the industry operates today. We envision a real-time industry-wide network that can automate the business that is done between trading partners. When you think of questions like, is this product authentic? Was my supplier's rebate correct? Are these raw materials coming from the right supplier? I imagine there are processes between companies that require a lot of master data management and setup and updating, a lot of manual intervention, and then a lot of auditing along the way, as well as dispute management when things don't go as planned. We believe with this technology, we can enable enterprise solutions that can take away a lot of these pain points, can align business rules between parties, and enable real-time data exchange and transaction exchange to really make these processes substantially more hands-free than they are today. What makes this different? First, solutions are designed decentralized. There is no middleman. It enables companies to do business directly with their trading partners, but can ensure that the rules are being enforced. We've designed the solution that companies control their own data. No one, not even Chronicled, has access to companies' private data. You control it yourself, and you decide who you want to share it with as you do business. We've designed the solution as a permissioned network. All parties are known, and everyone is onboarded into the network based on the role they play perhaps as a manufacturer or a wholesaler or a dispenser. And we've designed solutions to ensure that no business intelligence is leaked by participating in this network. As mentioned, business rules are enforced, and they're enforced not just on you, but on data that you receive. Our visual is, imagine this. Imagine if you could place an embassy inside your trading partner's firewall that allows the rules that matter to you to be enforced on the data before it even gets to you. This allows data and transactions to run clean and as expected, and that business can actually operate without exceptions. We believe strongly that this can unlock tremendous value that sits between business partners today, and we continually hit upon business problems between parties where everyone is dissatisfied. So this, we view, is an opportunity for everyone to win, not just one party to win, and we imagine new business models will form from this. I want to describe really briefly how we've designed a MediLedger node. It actually has a variety of components in it. First, I think a lot of people think of blockchain, and that they are correct, that all data posted to a blockchain is shared with all other parties in that network. The red portion of the node I'm showing here demonstrates the component that does exactly that. But actually, there are two different sections even within that blockchain interface. One is existing public data today, information like product item numbers, maybe public company information that you know who you're doing business with. And that is put onto the blockchain in the clear and shared with all parties. But there's also a component of data that's hidden, and they're hidden in cryptographic proofs. These become alphanumeric strings. They are still shared with all parties in the network, but they have no meaning and cannot be hacked by anyone except for the parties involved who have the appropriate keys and capabilities to unlock that information or validate transactions that they're doing. The second portion of our MediLedger node is a confidential messaging interface. This will enable direct peer-to-peer messaging. It does not interact with the blockchain component of the solution, but enables private messages to take place between parties that are in the network without requiring point-to-point integrations and point-to-point integration validations. Just by joining the network, you become capable of this messaging capability with other parties that are in the network. And based on, I think, learnings through time, the blockchain is actually quite intensive because it needs to be shared with everyone. And a majority of the work and a lot of the work in the business problems that need to be solved may require proof against a transaction on the blockchain, but the majority of work can take place with peer-to-peer messaging between parties based on the data and the rules that are being enforced. This then sets up what you can almost imagine is a multi-layer network, a component of the network where all data that's posted to those blockchain interface nodes is shared, and components along that blue line that enable messages to be sent peer-to-peer to anyone in the network. And if you can imagine, a company would run a node in this network and the entire node sits together, but that confidential interface and that private component sits behind companies' firewalls so they can be assured of the data security to allow the confidentiality in the messaging that they're sending. And these two elements comprise the MediLedger network and enable the building blocks for solving a lot of business problems we've identified in the industry today. A key component of how MediLedger works is that we bring working groups together. Blockchain is not something that can be solved with one company alone. We're really looking at the process between companies, and we're looking to deliver multi-company decentralized solutions that allow the industry to execute these processes by themselves. We work with companies to understand where there are shared business problems, and then we put together working groups and have a variety of phases that those working groups go through to work on solutions and define the business rules that they want to codify into the solution. In phase one, we identified a shared business problem, We work on requirements across parties, and we pilot and demo to understand enough about the business problem that we've really identified the business value and that there actually is value in solving the problem for the parties. That we don't find at this point that one party has identified benefit and the other working group members don't see the benefit of solving the problem. When we get to that point, we would move to phase 2, where we would work on commercial solution development, still iterating in an agile fashion how the solution should work and roll out for the industry. We set up interoperability testing between the companies that would run the solution. And then we would deploy the solution and go live in phase 3 with ongoing monitoring and refinement as we understand the management of the network and the management of the nodes in the network to ensure that it's delivering the business value as promised. We've found so far that there are 2 ways working groups form. Initial work, as I mentioned, comes out of the need for regulation. In the industry today, with the Drug Supply Chain Security Act and other regulations, there will be need for industry interoperability. And we look to solve that problem in a way that allows companies to run solutions themselves or enable solution providers on their behalf to do that. We have been listening to the industry, and when we get multiple requests from parties, we bring together companies to understand what and how that regulation can be solved and iterate from there. We've also had situations where it may not come from a regulation, but there's a pain point between companies, and interested parties come together who share that same pain point, and we identify ways to let other parties know if they're interested in joining. And these interested party problems may include components of the supply chain. It may include all of them, or it may include parts of them. But we really look to see and ensure that there's broad recognition of who may want to participate so that we can get a broad cross-section of approaches to ensure that the protocols we're developing become easy to adopt by the industry. We currently have 2 working groups operating right now. There's a supply chain working group stemming from the original DSCSA work that started in 2017. We're still discussing the current compliance of saleable return solutions and the industry testing that's taking place. And our FDA pilot work, which I'll speak about in a little bit more detail, is also discussed, and how that continued work will continue to evolve in the industry over the next couple of years. This includes exception handling as the industry is looking ahead to how serialized commerce is going to work. We also have additional topics emerging now as the understanding of this technology has grown. People are interested in dispenser verification, which becomes part of the law later this year. Potential dispenser visibility to understand where inventory is. Topics have also come up on master data management and recall management. We also have a contracts and chargebacks working group. This is focused on improving the process between contract providers, GPOs, manufacturers, and wholesalers to ensure that the data is aligned between parties and business rules are aligned and enforced. That allows the contract updates to happen seamlessly and in real time. That ensures that the chargeback happens as planned every single time and disputes are minimized. We've been discussing specific details of our solution, from customer mapping to know that all are speaking about the same customer, business rule enforcement, and how we have to look at that business rule enforcement at a network level, and how business rule enforcement will also need to take place at a trading partner level. We're looking at eligibility of full rosters from GPOs, and how can we automate that for manufacturers based on their own unique eligibility rules. And then looking to see how we can improve the adherence of 340B pricing and admin fee automation. There are additional conversations on additional topics, and groups are forming. And if companies are interested, they should contact us, and we can see if we can find shared pain points to bring companies together. I now would like to talk about MediLedger's FDA pilot work. I first want to thank all the companies that participated in our pilot evaluation. As I mentioned, in 2017, we did an initial exploration of how blockchain could solve the change of ownership of drugs to enable the interoperability of changes of ownership in the event of suspect product to enable rapid evaluation as per the law. These companies have picked up what we started in 2017, and we did a critical analysis to understand key issues and key questions, and we wanted to make sure we could address it across broad, different perspectives in this industry, from large manufacturers to small manufacturers, generics, large and small wholesalers, and a variety of dispensers and other logistics providers, as well as the impact on some of the industry participants who set standards. Our report is available on the MediLedger.com website, but as I mentioned, the intention was to really explore how could blockchain technology support this requirement for electronic interoperability in 2023. I want to walk through really quickly, for those maybe not as familiar, how this would work. We would, again, as mentioned earlier, set up a permissioned network. All participants in the network would be known. Companies are onboarded, and today they're onboarded with their GS1 company prefixes that are noted in the GTINs of the products that they are licensed to sell. The manufacturer would then commission serial numbers onto the blockchain in an obfuscated manner in step 2. And the first smart contract, the first business rule enforced on the blockchain is to check, does this manufacturer actually have control over that GS1 company prefix to allow them to even put these serial numbers onto the blockchain? That already creates an anti-counterfeit measure because only that manufacturer can do that. Once those serial numbers are commissioned on the blockchain, they're actually recorded with the current state of ownership of that box of medicine. Let's say box 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the blockchain can recognize that that box of medicine should not be put into commerce by anyone except for the rightful custodian at that moment in time. When the box is sold from a manufacturer to a wholesaler, the current electronic messaging would still continue to take place in the form of an EPCIS message, but as well, additional information from the confidential messaging interface, that blue box, is sent to the distributor. The distributor's blue box also creates specific confidential messaging, and then in step 3, that set of information is posted to the blockchain, where rules are checked. Is this coming from the rightful custodian? Is it being received by the rightful recipient? As well as other business rules. If all the business rules are met, it's considered a valid transaction and will be posted to the blockchain. And the blockchain now recognizes that box 1, 2, 3, 4 is owned by the distributor. It cannot be resold by the manufacturer because they are no longer the custodian of that box of medicine. If you can imagine, the stepwise process can continue with as many transactions through the supply chain to the dispenser for a return. And these controls can ensure that product is not diverted. And as mentioned previously, can eliminate counterfeits as well. We also believe this network can create the rapid response necessary as per the law in the event of suspect product. That would happen by broadcasting to the network, and companies would answer from behind their firewall the exchanges they did in the movement of this drug. So if you imagine, all the pieces of the entire provenance would come from each individual company to a single message, let's say by a query from FDA. And companies would also submit the proofs they put on the blockchain that prove they have not changed the data and that the data is authentic and valid. With all the work we did with the FDA pilot, we checked a lot of conditions to ensure that our methods were valid. And the key conclusions the companies came to is that that authenticity of that drug transaction could be confirmed in such a solution. It was also identified that the blockchain can enable compounding benefits that with the data that is connected in this record, there's a lot of other business value that each player in the supply chain could benefit from, and hence presents a really exciting industry opportunity. There is certainly concerns about adoption of such a solution and how that could be delivered to the industry, and that's something that we, and I think the industry, want to keep our eyes on. And knowing that there will be multiple solutions in the system, I think the challenge still remains on how we can ensure interoperability between systems without losing some of the potential benefits that have been identified.
Suzanne, we have a couple questions here. The first one is how the consortium will be managed and financed.
That's a great question. Today, the consortia has come together again through the facilitation of Chronicled, but I think that's a great question for the future as we're looking at 2023. And maybe I can actually jump just real quick to some of the next steps. If companies are not currently involved, a governance body called the Partnership for DSCSA Governance, PDG, has been launched. They have just started meeting and are looking to address how to provide guidance in association with the future of DSCSA enforcement. So we are working in partnership with them and the companies who are participating there, and we'll be looking for guidance from them on both that consortia management and interoperability standards. How it will be financed, I think, is a question that is still open. We maybe have a couple inklings from product verification. So maybe a quick summary. Product verification was required by law last November, and enforcement has been delayed until this November. That requires all drugs returned to wholesalers and resold to be verified prior to that resale. I think a lot of the foundation of maybe the financial model and the solution providers working to deliver product verification could give hints of how the financing of that future interoperability may work. Did you have another question, Mike?
Yeah, there was one other question about the actual flow for the track and trace system, the potential, basically how we actually resolve fakes and counterfeits when drugs actually come back from pharmacies or even wholesalers to the manufacturer. They're saying, the question is, even if you record the serial number, technically the drugs could still be counterfeit.
Great.
What's the level of security? Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say for drugs already in flight, I think that is a interesting question. But the assumption is if the manufacturer here in step 2 commissions all their serial numbers onto the blockchain, in theory, any other participant in the supply chain who's moving drugs, if they note a number that is either A, doesn't exist from the manufacturer's commissioning, or B, is showing up in commerce from a party that shouldn't have had it, it should flag a question. And depending on how a solution is designed, it could create automatic notifications to the manufacturer or others that something is amiss and something is showing up where it doesn't belong. But in principle, if the manufacturer commissions all serial numbers, then any fake number that shows up would already be flagged because it isn't coming from the original manufacturer's list. Okay. So I wanted to also mention product verification. So in the rollout of requirements for the industry, a lot of manufacturers have invested heavily in the product serialization solutions. This was stemming back from earlier components of the law. As I mentioned, product verification is a law that will now be enforced this November. And our product verification solution meets those requirements. There are also other solution providers companies are using. But what we're excited about product verification is that it represents a step function and is actually the groundwork for this 2023 confidential change of ownership that we've outlined in our FDA pilot and are looking to extend the existing work and existing solution to be able to meet those requirements. I'll close out then here as mentioned. We are participating and collaborating with PDG, who will be looking to define the gaps in current standards and provide guidance and help the industry define how future solutions should be governed. We're also in touch with HDA and GS1 and the work that they're doing to help the industry in the components that they are connected with. We'll also use the MediLedger working group to discuss key topics. Already we've been discussing, is EPCIS sufficient to address the regulation? How will we handle exceptions? And we will also continue to seek feedback from the industry on solution timing. Again, my understanding is from the work we've been partnering with PDG that there's work underway to define business requirements of what that electronic interoperability will meet. And we're very supportive of following along with the work that they're doing. So where are we going next? First, as mentioned, the network was established in 2019 with product verification. This required connecting and actually starting the groundwork of interoperability across the entire US market, connecting the 800 plus licensed manufacturers with the 100 plus licensed wholesalers to enable that verification to allow the greater than 2% of all drugs that are resold today. We're very excited with participation already that the MediLedger Network will verify greater than 95% of all drugs resold in the United States. And we're excited as now the industry is starting to ramp up product verification of drugs between now and the regulation going live in November of this year.
Suzanne, just a quick question before you get into the next slide. Would EDI and EPCIS be considered middlemen? And if so, will MediLedger make the industry more efficient? Are we planning on getting rid of EDI and EPCIS solution providers? Is the question.
Yeah, so I think it will depend on how manufacturers want to structure and architect their work. As I mentioned, we're supportive of the GS1 standards, and EPCIS messaging is part of the standards that are required as companies are exchanging information today and in the future. So we'll support EPCIS messaging, albeit our solution through the confidential messaging interface enables direct peer-to-peer messaging. So as we look ahead at EDI, EDI, to give context, predates the internet and really represents an electronic fax. We think technology today can do more than just exchange data. We can do rule enforcement, as I described earlier. So we're looking to potentially leverage the EDI standards, but exchange them in a peer-to-peer secure messaging construct that also can allow rule enforcement as well. As I mentioned, we've also now been working with the industry on the contracting and chargeback solution. So this now is not based on the regulation, but is based on the pain points felt across trading partners in our industry, with a variety of manual processing to evaluate rosters, reconcile them, determine eligibility, and then resolve disputes for the chargebacks where data has not been aligned. There is, even though I would say, an amazing effort on companies' parts to ensure the data is set up correctly, if you could imagine, every company is taking updates to customer information, customer identifiers, pricing, and they're updating their systems independently. And despite all that effort, a percentage of chargebacks still end up in disputed claims, which is costing everyone a lot of money. We've built a contracting and chargeback solution that allows the data to be validated as it's received. We're working on integrations with the third-party databases that are used today to identify customers to ensure everyone is working from the same data. We've created a business rule engine that allows manufacturers, based on their rules, to automate eligibility, could actually enable the ability to evaluate an entire roster automatically, even customers you haven't sold to understand who might be eligible for your contracts, and allow you to pass that information on to wholesalers to enable them to make better decisions as they're making sales. It allows the validation of chargeback claims against the latest eligibility and latest pricing, and then also contains historical tools to allow you to do research and accelerate either accepting new customers into contracts or fixing disputes because everyone will be working from the same data. We're really excited about this solution, and it's available next month, and really represents an extension of where we think this technology can help benefit businesses today. And this then is our roadmap. We're really excited about the idea, again, of not just single solutions for companies, but how this data is going to build upon itself and grow and improve the functionality to automate and create capabilities that honestly weren't possible before. As you can see here in the bottom left, our product verification solution is live, and that represents the foundation of what will be the track and trace solution that we're presenting for 2023 compliance with DSCSA. But there's exciting conversations taking place of benefits that can already extend from this product verification solution. As I mentioned earlier, dispensers will have verification requirements later this year. This solution could enable companies in a single application to be able to address any barcode of any manufacturer's drug that ends up in their pharmacies. We also believe there's an opportunity for inventory transparency, that manufacturers could potentially access data to better manage drug shortages and handle the inventory movement of their drugs to dispensers. There's suspicious order capabilities that could stem from this capability as well. We've also had discussions, as I mentioned earlier, about recall management and master data management. Once track and trace is enabled, there's an exciting set of both EDI messages and information that exchange at companies today that could be automated. And I think the exploration here is just beginning. On the top in the blue, you can see the revenue management solutions that we're tackling. Right now, the contracting and chargeback solution going live next month. We believe we can look at and address the automation of government contracts, admin fees and rebates, and credit transactions. We also are getting interest in the formation of a medical surgical contract and chargeback group, where our understanding is there are a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences in how customers are identified. But we believe we can leverage the contract and chargeback solution and hope to be launching that group later this year. What becomes really exciting then, if you look ahead, is how do we take data sets now that are being formed, and how can we actually create tremendous business value for everyone in the industry by now combining these data sets in a way that frankly wouldn't be possible the way business is executed today. The first example of that I would give is serialized chargebacks. So today, with the way the process is managed, if we actually multiplied that to a serialized unit level, I would say the feedback we've gotten from industry is that things would break. But once we've automated the contract and chargeback, and that all the updates are tracked and everyone is working from the same data, could we in the future, when drugs are moving through commerce at a serialized unit level, actually deliver serialized chargebacks and let the computers do the work and eliminate any revenue leakage, because the financial management of that unit is now tracked from the very beginning through all its transactions. Another area that's tremendously exciting are value-based contracts. Can we set up automated contracts that then can connect to the insurer's medical records of patients? And as patients are being treated, perhaps across months, perhaps across years, can we compensate the manufacturer based on the value that their drugs are actually delivering? This is the construct today for a lot of cell therapies, but we think by automating this, we can apply this now to many more drugs and ensure that, that the value that they're providing can be directly compensated, and incentivizes manufacturers to really be able to stand behind the drugs that they're delivering to patients. So this is the roadmap, and I would say in our working groups, we're continuing to form and understand where there's both business value for trading partners and business pain points, so that we can deliver and form, as we mentioned earlier, the work groups to address these business problems that can be solved where everyone can win. So that's the end of my presentation today, but wanted to leave time for Q&A. Briefly before we start, I wanted to note that this is the first in a series of webinars we'll be conducting We've got one scheduled for April and for May, where we're going to talk in a little bit more detail on the contracting and chargeback topics. But if there's any additional questions beyond the Q&A we go through today for people interested in our working group participation or other types of collaborations or interested in specific product demos, please reach out to me directly and we'll be happy to address those questions with you directly. But with that, Mike, I'd love to open it up for general Q&A.
Perfect. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Could you discuss interoperability with other blockchains and other similar types of networks, consortiums in the pharmaceutical sector?
Yeah, so I can start by addressing the fact that interoperability, whether it's with another blockchain or another solution provider, needs to be addressed. In our product verification solution, we are interoperable with the other solution providers serving the industry to provide verification services. We've leveraged specifications that were designed in the industry to actually start as the guiding post for how everyone's solution was designed. And then we've worked directly with those other solution providers to address any outstanding questions that the specification did not cover, just because everyone has their own choice of architecture of how to address the solution, and a specification can't necessarily address all of those. So we've worked directly with the other solution providers in the industry since middle of last year to ensure that the solutions we are designing and delivering are interoperable with each other in order to address the needs of the industry. In terms of other blockchain solutions, we are more than happy to have the conversation if there are solutions that are required to be interoperable. What we found, and I think our learnings from product verification, is you can talk theoretical for quite a while, and you actually need to have a real solution at the table to finalize what that interoperability would look like. So my expectation is, as mentioned earlier through PDG, we'll have some discussions about specifications that can help facilitate that interoperability. And then when we have actual solutions with multiple providers, we would work to define that, so I would say, last mile interoperability necessary for solutions to work together.
Perfect. And then another question is a little bit back to privacy. The specific question is, if different manufacturers are using the ledger, won't they see production numbers, sales numbers, things like that? What sort of access do companies have to each other's data?
It's a great question. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, a MediLedger node has a couple different partitions. And as mentioned, the components of data that get posted to the blockchain are shared with everyone in the network. So the questioner maybe has the right idea to know that if they're posting things on the blockchain, their competitors are going to get to see that information. And maybe even their trading partners see information that they view as business intelligence, and they don't want them to see it. So in our working groups, we're very thoughtful to vet and design solutions so that we understand what information is required on the blockchain, so that that it's available for many parties in the industry, and what actually would be exchanged as a peer-to-peer message. Let me give an example of pricing. Pricing is probably one of the most sensitive elements in the industry. We wouldn't put any company's prices on the blockchain. So if there's a pricing update, let's say between a manufacturer and a wholesaler, the manufacturer would actually send that information in that secure peer-to-peer message between them and the wholesaler. No one else in the network would know that that message was even sent. It's private between the two of them. No one even knows that private traffic that would take place. But the manufacturer will also post a proof onto the blockchain. What is a proof? A proof is a cryptographic construct. It represents as a alphanumeric string, and it's designed with cryptography that cannot be hacked in a time frame that makes any logical sense based on today's computing power. That proof is put on the blockchain. No one else can garner any business intelligence from it, but the wholesaler, when they go to sell that product and that contract maybe 2 months from now, they can check against the blockchain to ensure that nothing got messed up in their internal system, and that they're selling the drug at the latest price and the latest eligibility. The manufacturer has the ability to effectively verify against that proof that the data they have in their system is accurate to ensure that the transaction they will be executing is valid. But it doesn't leak any business intelligence to anyone else in the industry. And as maybe to finalize, the working groups that we have are really important to us to be able to vet these ideas and ensure that only the information on the blockchain is either publicly available or, as I mentioned, needs to be obfuscated. So the design of the solution is really critical to ensure that privacy.
Great. And then next question, just so everyone knows, we will definitely try to get to everyone's questions here. Please continue to post if anything comes to mind. But this question is, are there any compliance or performance monitoring requirements for MediLedger and the participating or integrated parties involved?
Compliance, maybe state it again, Mike?
Yeah, are there any compliance or performance monitoring requirements for MediLedger and any of the participants involved?
Right. So Chronicled plays a role of a network manager. As I mentioned, we don't have access to people's data, but we will be monitoring that the network is performing as expected. And we have a governance process with folks who are running nodes to ensure that that's happening as well. There are performance measures as we're looking as an example of product verification ramping up to ensure that if high volumes of transactions, verifications are taking place, can the system handle it? Again, this goes back to our design principles. For product verification, the blockchain is used to capture GTINs, so item numbers, and an IP address from manufacturers. Manufacturers control that themselves. But then the wholesaler can upload effectively all those individual phone numbers, and all of the verifications and the verification traffic is happening via secure peer-to-peer messaging. So frankly, as fast as the internet. We've designed a solution to ensure that it can encompass that, and we'll certainly be monitoring that as we go forward and as production verifications ramp up in the industry. But the actual load on the blockchain just has to do with updates to GTINs. And we've sized it to assume the volume of GTINs that would be coming onto the blockchain at any moment in time is relatively small. And once the system is up and running, we actually expect those numbers to be quite small.
Similar question, just around what the consensus method is for MediLedger and transaction time, if you have any estimates for that or what that might look like.
Yeah, so we're using proof of authority. We're operating in an industry of what I will call it trusted to semi-trusted partners. Maybe in the world, no one's 100% trusted. And so proof of authority is a sufficient level of consensus necessary for this industry. In terms of transaction times, I know as we look ahead to 2023, which would require serial numbers to be posted and exchange of serial numbers between parties, that volume and activity with the blockchain would grow. And our initial assessment is based on the volume of transactions and peak activity, that wholesalers are operating in similar timeframes during the night, and both receipt and send of information which would trigger transactions may happen at the same time. So we have estimated today that for the United States market, we would need the capability of at least 2,000 transactions a second. And we believe that's possible with the current technology. If we had enough participants, we could at some point limit which parties participate in consensus and perhaps make that round robin. But we haven't gotten to that volume of transactions yet, but we already have designs of how that'll be possible.
Great. And the next question is, would it be fair to say that once implemented, the system may actually eliminate some logistical barriers to entry for new participants in the pharma industry, maybe creating more disruption while also eliminating some current competitive advantage for existing players?
I think that's a really good question, and I think the future is still to be told. I will say, as we've evaluated how we think such a network could be set up, we have often used the analogy, could a MediLedger node be for an industry what a smartphone was for you personally? So if you imagine the ability to talk to anyone on your phone, similar, you can send a direct peer-to-peer message to anyone in this network. And then we hope to build applications, but honestly, this is an open platform, and we'd love to see others build applications on top of this platform that can allow companies in the life sciences to decide which solutions they want to participate in, similar to the App Store on your phone. And I could say from that analogy that our phones today do things that we never even imagined we needed, much less that they could do it as little as 10 years ago. And so we are hopeful that the business potential of what's possible will really be ignited by the innovation and imagination of companies and solution providers in this industry.
Great. The next question is on the sensitivity around generating new serial numbers by manufacturers. The question is whether that is considered commercially sensitive. For example, if the entire network could see when a manufacturer generate, X number of serial numbers one month and then the next month half as many, perhaps that gives some competitive information.
That's a great question. And I love where they're thinking, because I do think serial numbers are very sensitive information. And I will say in our initial work, when we were looking at changes of ownership of drug, we even worried about the traffic patterns, right? If you could see how much volume is being transacted, could you reverse engineer who specific entities are? And I'll say specifically the 3 wholesalers, it seems like it would emerge pretty quickly. Or in the event of a drug launch, could you then reverse engineer who a company is? So my cryptographers, who are never satisfied, have looked at ways that we can actually even obfuscate the traffic patterns so that it wouldn't even be clear to others in the network how much is being posted or managed from single nodes. It probably still requires a little bit more work, but that's already been considered. And I will say we're taking very seriously that the only way a network like this can work effectively is if we create the appropriate obfuscation that that really no business intelligence of any value can be leaked. So even, for example, if a drug is returned to a wholesaler, the way we've designed the solution is that the actual sort of identifier numbers with that transaction are different from the original sale of that drug. So no one could even do the number of hops a single box of medicine would take.
Great. The next question is on master data management. If you can elaborate a little bit, specifically, what's our system of truth for product and partner master data?
Right. So this is a great question, and I think goes to, the evolution. Today, we understand a lot of work has gone at companies to establish the record of truth at companies. And the expectation is that a MediLedger node can interface with a company's records, and that those records still could be the source of truth for a company, but they are able to be transmitted as appropriately to other systems or other solutions that require access to that data. That said, I think the exciting vision for the future, and I realize this is actually harder than it sounds, is if you imagine as a manufacturer, if we can put you in control of your master data, so the names of your products, the item numbers associated with your products, and you're the only one who can post those to the blockchain, and you're the one who's in control of changing and updating them, that enables for the industry access to, honestly, the source of truth, who is you, because they're your products. And they could eventually interface and access your data set to update their systems automatically. This ensures that if you imagine, instead of, call it dozens of companies taking your product information and manually entering it into their own systems, which could be ripe with errors and mistakes, could we eventually get to a world that you're controlling all your product data and everyone else is enabling a feed to their systems directly from you? That's, I think, the power of how master data could be managed in a system like this. But I understand the journey between here and there is actually quite complicated. In product verification, we've enabled GTINs to be in the clear, as mentioned, but they can only be controlled by the manufacturer who has the GS1 company prefix. And we think this is a great model for the future of how master data can be managed and consumed by the industry.
Great. And the next question, what are MediLedger nodes, and can any party or company run a node? And then what are the nodes? Can they work on AWS, on-premise? What sort of infrastructure is required?
Yeah, so today, MediLedger nodes are set up by companies who are participating in the solutions that we're running. So product verification has a set of companies running nodes, and the contracting and chargebacks will have a set of companies running nodes. So for today, I would say the premise is still that you run a node because you're actually participating in one of the solutions that's running. Running a node all by yourself is something that is not a construct for today. But I will say we are aiming for 2021 to start creating the development of a SDK, a developer package, so that we could start exploring enabling third-party developers to develop solutions. And in that time frame, that might become possible. In terms of running of the node, I will say I have to thank the industry participants, because they could have made it no less difficult. That in our product verification solution, we have a combination of on-prem nodes, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. So we can run on any infrastructure, and it still enables the connectivity necessary between the nodes to provide the business functionality required by the solution.
Perfect. And what is the costing model for running this? Is it subscription, transaction based?
So today, for the solutions that Chronicled is developing, we are have companies join on, and it is a SaaS-based model with tiered pricing based on the volume of transactions that the party will be running in the network.
Perfect. And then what is our view on including condition monitoring data in the system, which is also required to assess whether goods can be resold or not?
Yeah, so I know there's a variety of interest in the industry about condition monitoring and temperature monitoring. We've been having discussions with companies of how we can put this into the solution as well. I think it's an exciting opportunity. If you could imagine products arriving at the warehouse, them being scanned, and immediately having QA clearance, because all of the business rules necessary to ensure that conditions were met have been checked, potentially against companies' third-party devices. So that potential exists, and I would say is definitely one of the use cases on our roadmap where this network could help companies meet those requirements.
Perfect. And then is there a way to limit power on consensus? For example, who's running the nodes? If it's all manufacturers, for example, then how are the rights of the patients protected? And like NGOs, governmental organizations, can they run nodes?
Yeah, so again, it's an open platform. Anyone who has business in the industry can run a node. And if they're associated with the business process, we do have criteria. I'll say on the DSCSA side, there are defined rules of an authorized trading partner, and we're working to comply with that. And as the industry evolves the criteria, we can meet that criteria as well. Because we don't want, let's say, Joe in his garage being in the network and trying to garner information. Ironically, we've designed the solution that even if your competitor and trading partner can't get business intelligence, neither can Joe in his garage. So there actually isn't much business interest in him trying to participate. But anyone who has a legitimate business reason can ask to be permissioned into the network and run a node for the portion of the business that they would need to execute.
Excellent. And then I think there's just a couple more here. One was, could you talk just a little bit more about the counterfeit, the fact that even with the tracking and change of ownership, you still have no way of guaranteeing what is actually inside the package, and how that, how do you sort of complete the loop in terms of counterfeit and fraud prevention?
Right. It is a great question. So prescription medicine has a whole set of other laws that require tamper evidence in the United States and other parts of the world. So let's imagine the situation that a box of medicine, someone has taken the medicine out and put fake medicine in. Number one, the tamper evidence would hopefully work that could highlight to the recipient of that drug that something has gone wrong with this medicine and it's been altered. And maybe if I really wanted to be negative, even in the event that that happened and someone was very clever to make it appear that it had not been tampered with, that number that's on that box, 1234, yes, it now has potentially counterfeit medicine in it. The real box of medicine could be sold, I guess, illicitly, but no one could take box 1234 and make 1,000 copies of it. The system would ensure that there is only one of that numbered item. We've often used, if you're familiar with Bitcoin, there's no double spending. Only one Bitcoin exists at a time. You can't duplicate them or replicate them. So in the event, a counterfeiter could sell that one box of medicine, but couldn't make 1,000 copies. And I believe pretty solidly that that kind of ruins their business model. And it really would not behoove them to be in that counterfeit business to do one box at a time.
Okay, great. I think that is it for now. If there are any lingering comments or questions, we're happy to address them. Suzanne has her email there, so we'd love to hear from you. And just want to reiterate the upcoming webinars as well. As we mentioned in our roadmap, working on the revenue management side, I think it seems it's going to solve a lot of the pain points in the next couple of years as we continue building out on the supply chain side. So we would encourage anybody on the call to pass on the word around revenue management. If you have colleagues that also work on that side, we'd obviously love to share what's happening here, and obviously talk through ways, there's ways that MediLedger can support their team. Suzanne, any last comments?
No, I appreciate everyone taking the time to join today. And if there are any additional questions that come to you later, please send them our way. We want to make sure all questions get answered.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on the next call, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.